Hi there, my name is Tammy Lea Meyer, and this is the Voices of the Impact Economy. We're joined today by Paul Hartzog. Paul, thank you so much for joining us today.
Delighted to be here.
Wonderful. So, off the top, I've been starting these with, are you concerned about the state of the world today?
Oh, well, I think there's reason for hope and there's reason for concern. I think there's a divergence, and we see certain legacy kinds of structures in the world that are in real danger, and we don't know what to do about that. That causes a lot of fear and a lot of panic. And I think we naturally fall back towards old ideas and try to sort of renew some of those ideas. And that to me is not necessarily the right approach for a lot of these things. My fear is that a lot of the things that are more interesting, people trying fresh new approaches, don't necessarily get the attention that they deserve. And maybe they don't even get to experiment enough or try those things out and see what happens. And so that can make that transition very difficult. I do have concerns, yeah.
Can you just talk a little bit about the legacy structures that you talked about?
Well, I mean, we have structures that are designed to perform well in certain historical circumstances, and they've done that. We've seen that through late 19th century, 20th century. We've seen booms and busts, and we've seen the quality of life go up, and numerous things have happened around the world. But one of the things that happens when you learn about structures is that adaptation and maladaptation are not necessarily different things. So a cave cricket evolves to its environment, but you take it out of that environment, and to expect it to be well adapted is no longer a valid expectation. And so we get these hierarchies and voting structures and politics and all kinds of things, corporate bureaucracies. I could go on. I mean, that's a huge list. And I think, like I said, it's just our natural tendency to believe that because those structures have worked for a time, they're just going to keep working. And yet, if you look at ecologies and you study complex systems and evolution, you realize that that all adaptations eventually reach a point where they need to be questioned. And I think that's where we're at, is we're looking for what are the questions that we're not asking about our structures.
Yes. And do you think that we can turn things around?
Oh, I think we already have. I've seen over the last 10 years a flowering of people who are willing to question these truths that we all supposedly hold to be self-evident. And they're going out there and they're saying, I don't have all the answers, but I do have some interesting questions. And so we're going to get together a group of people and we're going to try something, and we're going to call it file sharing, or we're going to call it alternative currencies, or we're going to call it maker faire. I mean, all these people, these communities that are coming together and just being willing to put things on the ground and see where it goes. And yeah, a lot of it blows up, but it's supposed to, because it's at play. It's an experimental place. It's a sandbox. And I think there are generations of people happening in the world right now that are willing to do that experimentation and play without necessarily having to have all the answers in place,
Great. Yes. And so maybe you can share a little bit about your motivations and what brings you to this kind of systems work.
Oh gosh, I've been interested in futurism and computers and technology and systems thinking since the mid 70s, when I was a really small kid. I mean, I've always felt like we're influenced and shaped by our environments in ways that is really important to question, query, understand, attempt to pick apart and analyze. And so, for me, it's always been about, there are times when you know that you don't know something. And so you can go seek out that answer. You can design a problem or an experiment or program a simulation and try to get some answers. But sometimes you reach a point where you don't know that you don't know something.
Yes.
And that's tricky, because the only way to get past that is to get together with people like we're going to be doing and let things fall into your lap, and suddenly discover there's a whole field, or there's a whole group of people doing something out there, or there's a whole theoretical abstract notion happening in academia, or whatever the case is, that I never even knew it was there. I didn't know that I didn't know it. And suddenly you are armed with a whole new set of questions and a whole new set of concepts, which hopefully can transform into value for what you yourself are doing and what you yourself care about. And I'm motivated at the root of it by the desire to help people have that experience, that eureka of, oh, the world is bigger than I thought, and this could really help me, you know?
Fantastic. Thank you. And Paul, maybe we can just do a little dive into your work. Can you share a little bit of an overview of the work that you've been doing over the last few years?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's been a lot longer than the last few years. I started way back, like I said, as a kid, and doing technology things and having lots of fun that way. But, you know, as I grew up and I went into academia, I studied global environmental politics, and I wrote some early work on networks. And then I got a grant to go to the University of Michigan to study complex systems. Again, still, I was very focused on politics and economics and the future, and sort of where are we going and what's it going to look like when we get there. Mm-hmm. I ended up teaching at the School of Information at the University of Michigan. And then after that, I did a think tank with some great people, Sam Rose, Richard Adler. We tried to do both theoretical concept kind of work, as well as, because we were all programmers, building, architecting systems, asking questions about interoperability, ways to connect things. So a little bit of theory and a little bit of application. That was our primary interest, and that was great work. And I still really like being able to bridge those worlds. You know, I have a strong theoretical background, and I love to talk abstract concepts with people over coffee. But at the same time, my normal life is driven by architecting systems, trying things, building things, analyzing them over a period of years to determine how well they're doing, and come up with new ideas, and then try to implement those. So, like I said, a little bit of theory and a little bit of on the ground. I love that kind of stuff.
So this is the perfect event for you to come and throw down your wisdom and participate with others.
Oh, I sure hope so. I'm looking forward to catching some of the wisdom everybody else is throwing down. You know, I'd like to think that some of the things that I have to share, people find those ideas valuable or provocative. Or even if they just disagree with me and they want to talk about it, that's great. You know, that at least something's happening. Yeah, I'm very excited about this.
So what are your hopes for the summit?
Well, I think the biggest thing that I'm hopeful about this summit is not that we're going to get a bunch of great minds together and suddenly solve all the problems. There are kinds of people who do problem solving, and there are kinds of people who do problem finding. There are the kinds of people who ask questions and the kind of people who answer questions. And I'm more of a problem-finding, question-asking person. You know, Socrates got himself in trouble because he asked too many questions and people didn't like it. But I like that. You know, I like to be that person in the room who says, I hear what you're saying and I think it's really fascinating, and it makes me want to ask these kinds of questions. And I think, you know, for me, that discovery process of what are the questions we should be asking allows me to move forward, and the way that I feel that I can best provide value to people. So my hope for the conference is not that we come together and answer all these questions and then, you know, march forward thinking we've got the right plan. What I really hope is going to happen is that we'll get a bunch of minds together and realize that we've been thinking some things really well, and we've been totally missing other things, because I think that's really going to serve us best. And then we move forward out of this conference saying, okay, based on what we learned that we didn't know, now we can begin to do the hard work, you know?
Yes, yes. I love your approach as an inquiry and as a discovery. I think that allows us to really be present with what is, and surface what we need to know. So thank you for that. That's awesome. I guess let's dive into some of the questions that you have going into the summit that you'd love to get answered.
Well, the thing that I'm curious about is how what we know about economics and currency systems translates into being able to actually build things. So, for example, we know that, and this is a very concrete example, we know that in theory, making people's contributions to a commons visible enables them to manage that contribution, and therefore people are more inclined to contribute. And then when you see a system like BitTorrent, where the contribution theory gets turned into a concrete number called a share ratio that's either higher than 1 or lower than 1, then we see that implementing a theoretical concept through a built environment actually has real effects on people's behavior. It allows the commons to evolve the way that it should, because people will pay attention to that number and they tend to try to share more than they take, right? And I think most people want to contribute more than they take. So we've discovered that there are ways to take theoretical concepts that we know about and turn those things into real practical functionalities. And in the alternative currency space, I think we have an opportunity to look at what we know about the evolution of complex systems, what we know about networks, what we know about economic successes and failures, and start asking what's going to happen when we turn those into, say, Bitcoin or sharing systems or commons-based peer production systems, where we have numbers and people can determine how much they're contributing and what the overall value in the network is. So that's really where I'm at.
Wonderful. Those are fantastic questions. And we've got the right people in the room to really dive into what's underneath that. So fantastic. Here's one. Obviously, we've got some very, very powerful minds in the room and people that have done some really cool work. Who are you most excited to be able to more deeply learn about and collaborate with?
Well, Art Brock and I have run across each other at times, and I've done a fair amount of work with Michelle Bowens. So it'll be great, to get together with people who already like my work and that I love what they do and do that again. But there's really a lot more people at this conference that I have no idea who they are, never worked with them before, and I'm just bouncing off the walls excited to get into a space with those people and say, how can what I do benefit what you do? Maybe it can, maybe it can't, but at least it's a starting point for dialogue, right?
Yes.
And to be able to network with those people, and then it just so happens that my own availability as an academic and as a systems architect, I've made a commitment for 2016 to be more involved, escalate the level of participation that I want to have in these networks. And so I'm excited to be able to tell people, I want to help you. I want to be able to be an asset for whatever it is that you're doing. Granted, that means I've got to step up to the plate, and I've got to be willing to manage all of that. But in the time that I was teaching at the University of Michigan, and I ended up in a situation where I kind of had to take a step back from a lot of things. What you might call a sabbatical, right? Which we do in academia. And now I'm sort of at a point where I'm ready to stop that sabbatical and re-emerge. I've had a lot of ideas that have been percolating for a long time. I've paid attention, and I've realized that no one out there is really trying to get at the things that I'm trying to get at. Nobody's really saying the things that I've been mulling over for the last 5 years, which means those ideas are still valuable and they still need to get out there. And I'm really excited about this conference because it's my first opportunity to come out and say This is the stuff that I've really, really been chewing on for the last few years, and I still think that it's important. And so I want to share that, you know?
Mhm. I wonder if you can do a little snippet of sharing and with this question. What would, what are the constructs that are required to build a true, just, and generative commons?
Oh, well, yeah, that's a big question. Number one, I mean, I did a lecture at Stanford a long time ago that was all about commons and how you make sure that things are happening well, and it was about Eleanor Ostrom's wonderful work. I was very fortunate to get to meet her and participate with her on some conference things, and it really boils down to two elements. I mean, you have to deal with the resource in question, but you also have to deal with the people that are managing that resource in question. And so it's not just about how many trees are in the forest. It's also about how many people am I having that conversation with that we all care about those trees in the forest, right? So there are two levels of commons management that have to happen. And I think a lot of online systems and a lot of talk about the rhetoric of sustainability and solar power and all these kinds of wonderful things, even my own work on the energy commons or the food commons or the thing commons, it's very easy to just focus on the resource in question. Say we're talking about energy. Well, we're not. We're talking about an energy commons, but we're also talking about the political structures that have to be in place for the participants to accurately raise issues, dialogue about those issues, and then come to decisions about those issues. And that's why my 2 degrees are in political science, because ultimately I think this goes back to the Greek origination of democracy. You know, the Greeks in ancient Athens asked certain questions, and they came up with a set of ideas about democracy and about how to make decisions and how to take responsibility for participation in those decision-making processes. And I think a lot of what happened in that moment, that originary moment for democracy, is the kind of thinking that we want to carry into our online spaces and our Bitcoin networks. And we want to bring that level of thinking in and say, you know, this is a democratic moment. It's a democratic moment for new kinds of economies. It's a democratic moment for new kinds of sustainable infrastructure that doesn't harm the planet. It's a new kind of moment for overlapping communities to share and converge and also diverge about things that they care about and bring that debate to the forefront in ways that are helpful, meaningful, and keep the dialogue moving forward and not have it just get stalled like I personally believe many of our older structures have become stalled.
Yes, absolutely. Paul, that is a fantastic teaser into this week that we're going to have with some brilliant thinkers from all over the planet. I want to thank you so much for being a part of it, for coming, and for all of the work that you've done. And
thank you. And I'm really glad you decided to do these video interviews. I was really happy that I was able to get to do one. So thank you.
Yes, it's my absolute pleasure. All right, so this is Paul Hartzog with Impact Economy Summit in 2015 here in Whistler, and we will see you there.
Great.